now I've gone through and kind of placed hull paneling out through the rest of the ship here, at least for the main body. Haven't done the drive pods yet. We'll work on those in a moment. And I wanted to just make a special note here in the back. I did something just very slightly different where we've got the paneling going on like normal. Different pieces here, but then on the interior I took and made one entire kind of chunk section here, so that this is going to feel like one big solid piece, and this is going to be the core surrounding the main drives here. And my idea here is that these are going to be the drives that are going to be kind of main propulsion. They would be things for use in space as well as as well as in atmosphere. And then the ones here on the drive pods are going to be more akin to like thrusters. So these are going to be kind of atmospheric air breathing drives. We're going to have a bit of an air intake on the front, and we're going to have a number of different thrusters. Now these also would be useful in space, as they could be used for something like redirection of the ship to change attitude and whatnot. But out in space, the main propulsion is going to be off of this main drive back here. All right. So in addition to the difference that is right there, let me go ahead and hide the engines or the drive pods so we can see. The astute among you might notice that one of these groups of panels is not like the others, and that's going to be this one right in here. And the reason that this one is different, and the reason that it will look different to you, is that it has more edges. And the reason it has more edges is because this doesn't use any edge weighting. And so these are going to be sections that we're going to use in conjunction with MeshFusion to create the mounts and the rotors for the drive pods. And if you're going to use MeshFusion, once you engage MeshFusion, you lose any edge weighting on that particular mesh. So we're actually going to take these panels and I'm going to cut them out of right here. I'm going to create a new mesh item, which I will call drive mounts. And I'm going to paste these in, and actually I'm going to turn off symmetry, and I'm going to get rid of one of these because we're just going to work on one side for the MeshFusion, and then once we're done with the MeshFusion work, we will take and freeze and mirror over the stuff to the other side. All right, so the other part of this is going to be kind of the mid-section of the drive pods, which, again, right now I have mirrored, but I'm going to take and delete one side. And this is essentially the same process that we've gone through with the body, except I took the drive pods here and I took a middle section out of here. This is going to be the section where the rotors mount, and I also wanted to have a bit of the ability for this to pivot. So what I did is I took a big cylinder, which I've left in here because we're going to end up using it for some very simple rigging that's actually kind of critical to the way that this is going to be assembled, so I left these in. So this cylinder was just taken, and then the interior pieces of this drive housing were deleted, and then I just bridged in the cylinder where it intersected the drive housing. So real basic stuff, same kind of stuff we've been doing through the rest of the body of the ship here. But what we're going to do is we're going to create a cylindrical rotor here. So based off of the center of the ship, so the main body, the engine will be able to rotate kind of in this direction, so like this, and then within the engine itself here, since we have this big area with this rounded part, we'll create a little bit of a housing that will get this kind of rotation. It won't be on that axis, it'll be off the axis of this guide layer, but we'll get to that when we get there. So what we need to do right now is create two MeshFusion pieces, one for the body that has the rotator in one direction, and the other one where it will mount to here with kind of the insert for the rotor that will go into the body of the ship. So let's go ahead and hide that. And we're going to go down to the drive mounts layer. I'm going to hide my panels because I don't need those at the moment. They're just going to be cluttering things up. And while we're at it, we can hide the canopy. Okay, so actually for just a moment here, I'm going to leave the pod sweep in here because I want to be able to have something to align my cylinder here to the initial cylinder. So we're going to create a new mesh item. And this one we'll call drive shaft. We won't end up using this one, but it's just in here so that we have it for reference, and we'll end up creating a MeshFusion item with this and the drive mount. So I'm going to start here just by getting a cylinder and dragging this out. And I'm going to make it so that it intersects with the with this mount here. Now you see that I've got the whole plating thickened here, so I want this to be kind of like a beefier, thicker area that this attaches to, so that we get the feeling like it's you know, it's got plenty of strength to be able to actually hold up an engine of this size. So I want to make sure that this is a nice even circle, and I also want to make sure that it's centered up fairly well in this mount area, and I want to make sure that it fits inside of this kind of drive area here and is mostly centered on it. So let's zoom in just a little bit here, and I'm going to switch up to my top view, and you can see these edges running horizontally. Those are going to be the edges that are the inside part of that that cutaway with that cylinder. So I just want to center these up fairly well on there. So if I go for this middle edge, that's right down the middle of that housing that will hook onto the drive pod. There we go, something like that ought to work. So as long as we're pretty close, we should be fine here. And I want to make sure that I also have on a top cap, I want to have a quad grid. I can actually leave the bottom cap off, but I'm going to put it in just so that I have it. It's overlapping the rest of the ship, so we won't see it, but I want to make sure that we have it there. Okay, so now that we have that in place, I can go ahead and hide the part that hooks up to the drive itself, and now we're actually ready to start doing some MeshFusion work here. So let's take this part here. I've got to make sure that it's subdivided. Shift Tab for Catmull Clark subdivisions. I'm going to bevel off this corner here to make it nice and sharp. Give it a round level of 1. That way I retain the edge in the middle, and I get a nice kind of crisp corner there. All right, that'll work. And let's see. So what I'm going to do, my plan for this is to take and have basically just, for the most part, a normal cylinder. I'm going to add just a little bit of taper to it, so I'm going to pull out the outer edges just a little bit, which here I'll do right now. So let's use the scale tool, and scale tool, and I'm going to use a linear fall off. And I'm going to make sure that linear fall off is going in the X, and that its fall off mode is linear. So now you can see it's going to get wider towards the back. And now I'm just going to pull this out just a little bit to scale it. And now we get a little bit of a taper. Now the one problem that we're getting here is we're getting kind of some rounded parts coming out. So what I've got to do also is take, and we can we can leave that on. Let's just pull this back a little bit. And since I'm back here, I'm going to go ahead and take and bevel this edge as well, just to make sure that we don't get any kind of weird roundness coming off of there. So now we get something, I think, a little bit nicer shaped there. All right, so now we're going to continue on here. We're going to take this middle section here, shift and the close bracket to kind of close the selection. Let's turn off our fall off there, and then we're just going to bevel in a little ways. And this is going to be fairly thick piece here. This is just kind of my outer ring. I'm going to put some details onto this here. So I'm actually going to have another MeshFusion item that will cut away a center kind of core that we'll be using where the shaft from the drive pod itself will insert. But that ought to work for this. Okay, so we're ready to actually start assembling this. So I'm going to select both of those pieces, go to Fusion, make a new Fusion item, and we'll call this engine mount, which is fine. New Fusion item. And if you're not seeing the Fusion displayed here, go to your views and make sure that you check Model Fusion and turn that on, and that way you'll be able to see what's going on here. Now I can see right now that my little edge here is very, very shallow, so you can see my strip width is set to 1% when I select the engine mount. I'm going to increase that to maybe 2.5%. A little bit of rounding there, not too much, but a bit. I think something like that is going to work fairly well. So now what I'm going to do is create a series of insets kind of cut along this rim, and then some other pieces that will attach in around the edges, and then also an inset right down the middle that will cut all the way into the core of the ship. And if I bring in the internals, what I'll want to see is I want it to cut in all the way to where it's almost meeting the interior rooms, but not so far that it is going to hit them. That way I have a good range of motion where that kind of like a piston can extend and contract. All right, so let's go ahead and do that. So I'm going to start just by selecting this loop of polygons right here, and I'm going to center my work plane around them. So we'll set the work plane to the selection, and now you can see we've got everything nice in the middle of space here. And we're a little bit off on orientation, but that's okay because we're going to just basically use this to create a radial array around here, or a couple of them rather. So let's go in now, and I'm going to create a new item. And I'm not going to bother naming these extra meshes just because they're only going to be here for a short time. And now what I'm going to do is zoom way in here, and I'm going to create a little tapered cube. And we're going to just place this right at and intersecting the edge of this. So I'm going to let it cut almost all the way into the center here, so maybe something like that. And then on this side here, what I'm going to do is pull this down so that we get kind of a graduated stepped cut down there, giving us a little bit of a kind of a diagonal. All right, so I think that is going to work. I'm going to go ahead and subdivide that, and I'm going to add in some sharpening at the edges because I want to have a nice sharp piece here. Okay. And then again, shift and the close bracket key to close off my selection. And then I'm going to get this with a fall off, with another linear fall off. And we're just going to take this section here and pull it down quite a ways. Maybe something about like that, I think ought to work. So this is going to cut into the body of this here, and we're going to give this, these machined little cuts. So let's go ahead and take this, and I'm going to now duplicate it because I need a whole array of these. So we'll go to duplicate, radial array, and my default here is 12. Let's actually click and see how that works. Actually, that's not bad. So I think I'm going to leave that at 12. But before I do that, let's go ahead and undo that. I'm noticing that I didn't add in any extra support edges through here. Oops. Let's go ahead and turn our fall off, and I'm going to add in some extra loops right through there. I don't need these extra ones, so I'm just going to get rid of them. No need over complicating this. Okay, there we go. So now we'll again go back, radial array, and I know that that looked pretty good. Let's set this to 12 and go ahead and click apply, and there we go. All right, so now all I have to do is in item mode select this, go down to my fusion tab, make it a subtraction, shift click on this cylinder, this housing, and click trim. And there you go. So now we've got those parts cut in. Now I can actually hide this so that we can see a little bit better what it's going to look like. And I think that's looking pretty much exactly like I wanted it to. So the other thing that I'm going to add is a series of a little bit wider kind of bridged off little chunks here. So let's again go in here, make a new mesh item. And this one, we're going to go ahead and create another cube. And I'm going to start with everything kind of in the same general orientation, but then we're going to move it over so that they're in between and staggered. So I'm going to have only 6 of them, and they're going to be, instead of lined up with these cuts, they're going to be in between every other space. So let's go ahead and create these first. And I got to make sure that these sink far enough down into the housing that that they won't pop out when they come down here to this section where this scoops down. So let's actually pull this down fairly far. And I'm going to give myself a few more subdivisions. And then just like I had done with the other one here, let's go ahead and select this. and I'm going to do a linear fall off on the Y, and this time I'm just going to use my scale tool. I'm just going to scale this out, subdivide it, and again go in with a few sharpening edges. Now these I'm actually going to see more directly, so I'm going to clean them up just a little bit more than the other ones, because it isn't just an inset, it's actually going to be visible. At least the top part of it will be. I think that works pretty well. All right, so now I'm going to go ahead, same thing, I'm going to create a radial array. So let's go into duplicate, radial array. This time I'm only going to do 6, and I'm going to apply that. So now we've got them, but they're in the wrong orientation. So what we'll do is drop everything, use the rotate tool, and I'm just going to rotate those. I want to get a good spot here so that they're in between. And yeah, I think something like that works pretty well. Okay, so now I'm just going to go again to item mode, go down to the Fusion tab, and we'll make this an addition. And then we don't have to select the meshes that it's going with, because it's automatically going to attach to the other main items, which are the cylinder here and the hole plating. So we can go ahead and deselect that. We can hide this so we don't see it. And there we go. So now we've created some more complex form on this instead of just having a real simple cylinder. Okay, so last thing that we're going to do here is create a cylindrical cut into this. So let's make another fusion item. This time we're going to make another cylinder. I want this to be fairly wide, but I want to make sure that it is even and centered up. And then we'll just extend it out a little ways. And then, like I had said before, here, let's go ahead and reset the work plane and bring in our interior here so we can actually see where this is going to cut in. And I dropped the tool, but that's okay, because all we have to do is scale this and then add a few extra subdivisions. So let's scale from right here and just pull that back inside. Make sure that I am leaving plenty of room, which I'm fairly certain we are. And that ought to work. And I'm just going to take and kind of orient this so it's a little bit more straight up and down. And we're going to duplicate this too. So I'm going to go ahead and take and duplicate this item. And I'm going to call this item drive pod shaft, and that's going to go into the other drive shaft up there, but we're not going to do it quite yet. So let's go ahead and hide this. We'll select this guy here, make sure we got the whole thing, shift tab. We're going to need a few extra edges, I think, here and through here. There we go. And now we go to item mode. We'll make this one a subtraction. Then we shift click on both the cylindrical base here as well as the item itself. And we click trim. Now you can see that there is going to be a slight problem here, and I wanted to show this so that we can see what's going on and we can fix it. You can see this way we cut straight through the item, which could be okay. But since we currently have the ability to do this, what we're going to do is we're going to extend this inner portion here of the fuselage, or of this piece of hull plating rather, and we're just going to take this whole bit here and we're going to straighten it out. We're just going to pull it out so that it covers the inside edge here. All right, so we're going to take a move tool, just pull this back. Now this may start to bog down if you do this here in the Fusion view. So what I'm going to do for the moment is hide my Fusion item, which is the engine mount. And that will allow me to have a little bit more fluidity with my working here. And you may want to also turn off Fusion mode if that helps too. So let's go ahead up here to default, just model base. And it's not helping too much because it is making the calculations in the background. So you have to understand that we're not just moving parts now, but we're moving parts and interacting with a subdivision Boolean at the same time. So, you know, it's understandable if it takes a little bit longer. All right, so now we've got that back far enough. I'm just going to use my scale tool to flatten it out. And again, we'll be a little bit patient. We'll give it a second here. I just clicked and dragged to the left, and we'll give it a second to catch up. Alrighty, that works, except we are overlapping just a little bit, so now I can take and pull this back in just a little bit so that we're not overlapping the interior of the ship. That ought to work. And now I'm just going to select the loop through here. Alt-C to add a couple of loop slices. And this is really just to kind of solidify the shape here. And once we have now this kind of bulge created inside of the ship, it's going to allow us to have a cut on that fusion item that will go all the way back into the inside of the ship. So let's do the same thing along the top here. And once that catches up, there we go. So now we can drop the tool. And now we're pretty much done with the complex editing of the Boolean. Let's go ahead and go back to our model fusion, turn on our fusion item. I'm going to hide all of the associated fusion pieces so we can actually see what's going on. And there we go. So now we have that nice engine housing. We've created kind of this nice big piece inside here that is going to kind of give us, if we ever have any exploded shots, we can actually see the housing where, you know, this big heavy engine is going to fit. And now we're pretty much ready to go on this piece. So you can do the same thing on the opposite side, so where it's attached to the body of the ship. However, you don't necessarily have to use fusion items in that case, because really all we need is to have this drive pod shaft, which will extend out and attach to the drive pod sweep, which I can take here and just put in place so we can see what's going on. So let's start just by having it all the way flush inside there. And then I'm going to deselect half of it, just move the other half out, kind of just generally to meet the other part there. And now you can see we've got these two pieces. And the cool thing about this is, since we've created this with all this depth, now this allows us to actually have some range of motion for these drive pods. So if I want to extend them out, I know I can extend them out fairly far. You know, we'll have to keep some inside of the housing there, but I can extend these out quite a ways without having to worry about if they're going to fall out of the ship. And then I know exactly what my range of motion is. And it looks like I've got about 3 meters of in and out space, so about 10 feet of possible movement. And then on top of that, these are going to be able to pivot and rotate. So that pretty much does it for this part. We're going to go around and do the same thing that we've done with the hull plating and create the plating around the engine. I'll just do that here in between videos, follow the same process, and then we'll move on to actually creating some of the engine and weapon details throughout the ship. So that does it for this one. Thanks, and I'll see you in the next lesson.